panelists go ahead and introduce themselves. So,
I'll go first.
Sure.
So my name is Keith Wimes. I am the VP of Marketing of Elemental Technologies, and if you don't know us, Elemental is a video processing supplier into the multi-screen video delivery space. And we've been around for about 7 years now, the last 3.5 or so in kind of product launch phase.
All right, my name is Eric Grab. I'm the VP of Technology at Rovi Corporation. I primarily focus on DivX technology, which is embedded in lots of consumer electronics as well as software that you can get in your PC. And I've been involved a lot recently with HEVC compression technology and deploying that to consumers as well as our business partners.
And I'm Aidan O'Rourke, Marketing Director at Broadcom Corporation for our IP set-top box product family. Broadcom, we're based actually just down the road in Irvine, and we make chips for a range of different products, set-top boxes, cable modems, switches, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm happy to be here, and hopefully we can have a very interesting discussion.
For those of you who don't know, HEVC, also called H.265, is a new compression scheme that was developed by the ITUT Video Coding Experts Group and the Moving Pictures Experts Group. It was just formally approved in April of 2013, so relatively new. One of the goals in developing HEVC was to offer a 50% bandwidth savings over the widely used H.264 compression scheme that was developed early 2000s. I think it was formally standardized around 2004, 2005. With the bandwidth savings, the goal was to get a 50% efficiency over H.264 so that a video stream of the same resolution would take up half the bandwidth. So wanted to show, this is a video from Elemental. Oh, sorry, I'm not having much success here. Bringing it up, nope. And it worked earlier. There we go. Nope. All right.
I think if you just click on the
All right.
HEVC tab at the bottom there, will it come up? See the one?
Oh,
There you
that's
go.
the one. There we go, and I had already set it to where I needed it to be, so. So as you can see from the video demonstration, they've got the, where's my full screen button? Sorry. You know, they're showing 3 megabits per second and 5 megabits per second, the 5 megabits per second in H.264, the 3 megabits per second in the new HEVC codec. So, you know, it's a demonstration. They're showing it over at their booth as well if you want to see the whole video, because I took just a segment of it. But the first question for the panel is, you know, this is a demonstration, but is HEVC going to meet that goal, and, you know, right from the start, or if not, when?
Yeah, so, you know, I think from our perspective, what we've seen over the last year or so, we've been showing HEVC compression, I think, for about a year on our side. We are very far along. You know, we have a software-based approach, which allows us to innovate very quickly. I think most of what we've seen, even with the early demonstrations over the last 12 months or so, have been anywhere from 40 to 45%. But we do see some elements where it is approaching 50%, particularly with the higher resolutions. And I think the pace of innovation that's been happening over the last year or so has been a lot faster actually than H.264. Partially due to software-based architectures and the ability to take very powerful solutions and apply them to this problem. But I think it's been proven really that we're there. That particular side-by-side is taken from a comparison of real-time encoding. And so to have a 40% bitrate change and drop with a real-time encode is actually pretty extraordinary, given that it was just standardized, as you said, in the first quarter or so. So I think it's there actually.
Yeah, if you look at the reference encoder, which is provided as part of the standard, that gets up to 40% in many video clips. And so the problem with that, though, is it takes anywhere from a day to encrypt about 3 or 4 seconds of video, which is clearly not production ready. But that's what's really happening in the industry, is we're getting better at making it work in closer to real time with probably hardware assist, but even software is getting faster and faster. There's a trade-off always in compression quality and in speed to do that. But I think certainly for some of the software that we've released this year that you can get on the PC today, I mean, we're seeing 20, 30, 40%. And actually just getting 10% a few years ago was considered fantastic. So here we are getting huge amounts, which makes a big difference for anyone distributing video anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I would say from Broadcom's perspective, I mean, we're probably looking at it more today from the decoder perspective, and so we get to kind of benefit from a lot of the hard work that these guys over here are doing. But I think like any other technology, it will take time to get optimized. I mean, if you look back to the days of H.264, I think you'll all agree that back in those days, the transition was all about standard definition to high definition, and high definition was if you were doing HD streaming at 10 megabits, you were doing pretty good, okay? And I think as you've seen over the years, as we've rolled out and matured that technology, and the encoders have become more efficient, we've definitely got those bit rates, probably 5-6 megabits is probably like a reasonable streaming rate now for HD. So there's been a very big improvement over that 8 years or so to 10 years. I totally agree with Keith that the pace of innovation and the rate at which this compression is improving is significantly faster. I think the other areas that we're looking at is not alone just the HD, but also in the Ultra HD category, where those the benefits of those compression rate improvements are even kind of more important, because you've got these significant network loads now that you're creating by distributing this Ultra HD content. And so we've seen typically today for 4K kind of P24 type content. Today with HEVC, I mean, you can probably do stuff like that in around 20 megabits. And I'm sure if you were doing that in AVC, you'd be significantly higher than that, probably 35 or so. But we do expect that will continue, to improve over time. And I think, rates of like, 15 megabits per second for full 4K P60, in the next few years will not be, out of reach. And I think that's one end of it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I think there's other markets that are actually just looking to stretch HD as much as they can and try and get those bit rates down as low as possible. So, 1 to 2 megabits for HD streams don't seem to be, too far out of the, out of the realms of possibility with HEVC technology. So yeah, we're seeing that, and we're doing the same kind of side-by-side comparisons, where you compare H.264 to H.265, and we think those numbers are definitely, achievable, and we're actually doing it today, and it's going to continue to improve.
Aidan mentioned a couple other applications where just getting the bandwidth for HD down is going to help immensely. So wanted to go through from the panel the various types of applications they see, besides 4K, which is a big one, which we'll discuss in a little bit. What other applications they're seeing for the use of HEVC in order to reduce the bandwidth?
So I'll go first?
However you guys want to do it.
Yeah, so I think if you look at any video infrastructure today that's doing, honestly, even MPEG-2, but definitely H.264, there's going to be an evolution to HEVC over the next decade. It's going to take, it takes a long time. It takes longer than everyone kind of imagines it'll take. But I think if you look at it from the satellite perspective, if you look at it from the cable perspective, telco TV or IPTV, and especially over the top, where every bit that's delivered has an operational cost to it in terms of over-the-top delivery. That immediate savings, if you invest on the encode side into an HEVC solution, you can immediately be saving 40% of your delivery costs. And having players out there that can decode HEVC, where you bring your own device to the market, the adoption cycle on the consumer side is going to be a lot faster actually than what digital first did with MPEG-2 as well as H.264. I think the folks that will move first typically will be either over-the-top types of delivery or satellite. I think we saw this very clearly in 2004 or 5 that satellite is always looking to push the envelope in terms of delivering a better experience to the end user. This gets into the Ultra HD discussion, and I think they will continue to have that lead in the market in terms of delivering a better consumer experience, and HEVC will help to drive that. You can get a couple channels potentially in a QAM over a direct-to-home type of scenario. And I think cable will be a little bit more lagging, and IPTV will be maybe more in the middle. Greenfield operations, obviously, as soon as there are set tops, which I'm sure Aiden will talk to. It gives a really good opportunity to either extend that network along that copper, so that you can get deeper into the kind of far reaches of the network, or deliver more services over that fixed connection. So,
I think you'll see, personal computers now, most of them actually have the power to do HEVC in software. And so I think, where there's adaptive streaming, where, bandwidth is limited, and, if you're in a household and all of a sudden, 2 people want to actually watch 2 different, shows, all of a sudden they're competing for the same bandwidth. So places on the PC, that's where certainly I think it will happen, very quickly, because we have that technology today. Also, some places actually maybe goes to set-top boxes, is where you have a plug-in. You don't have to worry too much about power, because there are potentially chipsets today that can be upgraded to work with HEVC. They may just use a little bit more wattage to make it happen. That's a potential place it could happen soon as well. And I think in the mobile space, because the mobile chips are moving very quickly, and the refresh rate on those is incredibly fast. And so I think in 2014 we'll see mobile. And of course, that's where there's also bandwidth constraints in terms of, you're on 3G or 4G, and doing video through there seems a little bit iffy. But if you could cut the bit rate by 30, 40%, that's a game changer. And so I think we'll see a push out to mobile devices as soon as the chipsets get there for optimized playback. Because right now, playing HEVC on a battery-powered device, mobile is not too feasible unless it's really low resolution.
Yeah, and to maybe, I've seen a couple of other interesting angles on HEVC that I hadn't, fully appreciated. I've been actually traveling back and forth to South Africa, fairly frequently recently, and they are in the middle of kind of a broadcasting analog shut-off to digital transition. And a lot of these, the broadcasters, they're in the business of managing spectrum, and it turns out that, governments like to auction spectrum. Who would have figured that, right? So they're obviously looking to try and reduce the amount of spectrum that's, allocated for a TV broadcast, and they obviously want to try to maximize the amount of spectrum that's available for, for next generation mobile networks, and auctioning off that spectrum. So the whole idea of taking HEVC and then kind of pairing that up with next generation broadcasting technologies like DVB-T2 or ISDBT here in the U.S. Not so much in the U.S. because I think most people consume their content through cable or satellite, but in other parts of the world, HEVC is really seen as being a key enabler that enables these these broadcasters to much more efficiently utilize that spectrum for broadcasting. So that will be a major push for HEVC going forward internationally. Okay. Another area that I think we've seen a big change in the way that TV's been delivered is if you look at, I'm sure you've all seen the UVerse commercials for Wi-Fi delivery, the wireless receiver stuff. And again, there's wireless technologies that continues to evolve as we go through, 802.11n to 802.11ac, and they get more efficient at that. But at the end of the day, there's still walls and doors and things like that you got to get through. And obviously, if you can have a lower bit rate, then you can have more robust schemes for delivering those bit rates with FECs and retransmissions and things like that. So I think anything that reduces the overall bit rate of HEVC and then enables you then to kind of with beamforming and things like that, push that content deeper to these client devices within the home is a huge deal for these guys, because anything that saves a truck roll is obviously a major cost saver. So that's kind of in addition to the over-the-top stuff and that the satellite guys want to all kind of get the jump ahead on 4K. I think there's other more subtle kind of things that people are looking at for actually deploying HEVC.
And it could even be on the contribution side too. We tend to talk about distribution just because that's all of our sweet spot. But on the contribution side, having an encode and a decode, especially over as the content acquisition gets more fragmented and you're going basically down market from what used to be major arenas down to college locations, all the way down to the high school level where the bandwidth is not always available and always there. That's another area where HEVC could pop up. It's an area we don't often talk about, though.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to think about is, HEVC is like this new engine that all of a sudden is like twice as efficient as the previous generation of engines, and it has applications almost everywhere. If you're building a car, everyone's going to want that, either the more powerful car or the more efficient car, and it has many places it can fit. And so I think that's what's exciting about this technology, is it's so fundamental to so many different distribution methodologies, or whatever you want to do, however you're distributing video entertainment. Having better compression just simply makes it better.
So when will HEVC products be shipping, both for the infrastructure as well as consumer devices?
Well, from software perspective, we did ship something already. Rovi did through the DivX players was available in September, and that was essentially able to encode an HEVC and decode an HEVC on the player. So that's a software side. I think on the hardware side, from what expectations I've seen, it's going to be starting definitely in 2014, and I guess maybe that's certainly something for Adrian to comment on in terms of what he sees as, but I think we're going to see products in 2014 pretty quickly and actually ramping up very fast.
Well, obviously, I'd be interested to do it in terms of what Keith has to say on the encoder side, but I can tell you that like people are very, very, very focused on the World Cup next year. They definitely want to have field trials. Lots of operators want to have field trials, volume field trials, in place with maybe not production product, but pretty close to it. Call it pre-production. And there definitely seems to be like a nexus of guys lining up to have some kind of service that's going to be deployed in production volumes by the end of 2014. And certainly from an overall chip availability standpoint, we're lining up our products to be available to be launched in that time frame. And we've been demonstrating the technology too, since basically since CES of last year. So we've been certainly working on that for a while. But yeah, I think definitely something at the end of 2014 you're going to see these products in production volumes, or at least in pre-production volumes.
So on the encode side, we are fundamentally a software company, and so our ability to innovate has been very fast, actually. We first showed HEVC in a non-real-time scenario at IBC a little over a year ago, so 2 IBCs ago. We actually showed it in real time at NAB this year, up to 1080p 30. And then over the course of the next 6 months, we evolved it to both being able to do real-time P60 and multiple ones within a given solution, as well as 4K, initially in a file-based scenario. So at IBC, we actually showed file-based HEVC 4K. But just recently, we've gotten to real-time with 4K as well. We did a demonstration in a live public environment, actually, at the Osaka Marathon I guess it was 3 weeks ago or so, we were doing 4K P30 HEVC directly out of a Sony F55 camera, going into our encoder, out over an IP network, and then going to a PC-based decoder, and then a 85-inch Bravia TV. And that was something that everyone could see there near the finish line of the marathon, and it was a pretty landmark event. And so from our perspective, we've been putting HEVC into our customers' hands basically over the last 6 months. We'll probably get into some licensing questions or discussions. We've been basically tracking where we place that code to be able to then go back and make sure that we're compliant with however licensing shakes out. But for us, on the encode side at least, we're compliant all the way up to the full spec of the standard as it exists today. We're able to do 8-bit and 10-bit types of compression, so the color space can be very rich and dynamic. And so we're helping folks prepare basically for a lot of the trials I think that are going on, and having decode targets within devices or within next generation set tops or next generation smart TVs is kind of the next wave of what will happen.
Okay, Keith, since you brought up licensing, what are the barriers, if any, do you all see to the adoption of HEVC, or what might slow down the adoption since, as you said, products are going to be available it seems pretty widely in 2014?
Yeah, so I mean the licensing issue is always an important one, right? So MPEG-LA typically will create a pool around a codec with anyone that has IP that they want to contribute to that pool, and then they can get remissions from that and get payment for giving that into the pool. And I know they're in that process. It was talked about a little bit. Someone from MPEG-LA was in an earlier HEV session yesterday. They're working around it. There's about 36 companies in the pool today. We had heard that it was going to be fourth quarter about 6 months ago. That's possible from what they're saying. But on the encode side, and in some ways on the decode side, you guys are willing to put a player out there and take a little bit of that that leap of faith. I don't think the patent pool is going to do something that is dramatically different from H.264. It'd be pretty short-sighted, I think, to try to do something dramatically different. And so on the encode side, it's not a huge risk factor, but I think getting that clarity, particularly for the publishers, is important in order to have 2014 be a time when it actually starts to do the early stages of adoption.
Yeah, I think the important point to make is that this is deja vu. This is MPEG-LA has done this process before, and it's been a while since the last major leap in compression, but still the process is very similar in getting the patent holders together and figuring out what to do. So can't make too many predictions here what's going to happen, but at least it's comforting to know that this process has been through before, and I don't think it's going to really be a large barrier. I think sort of in the broader sense of what are the barriers to making this work, I mean, anytime there's a new technology specification, it does take time for it to cascade through the whole ecosystem. And as we're working on encoders, we're creating content, and so you can do it in software, it'll get to hardware, and there's lots of tests and things you need to do to make sure there's interoperability. So I think there's some, it's not trivial to apply such a large standard to the whole ecosystem, but we're seeing that because this has happened before, various players are very poised and well positioned to accelerate this. I think that's a major point, is that just what Keith was just talking about, in the fact that we released something this year for an encode and decode, that's much faster than it ever happened in H.264. And so in some ways I see the barriers as less, because everything now has video and Moore's law is marched on, and we have more transistors to work with. The software is getting faster and easier to work with. So I think there's less barriers than in previous generations, and this is just going to accelerate faster than the previous time this happened, which was almost 10 years ago.
So a few observations on the, I won't comment directly on the licensing, but I think as long as the deal is a reasonable deal, and I think certainly there was significant learning as we moved from MPEG-2 to H.264, and the licensings that were surrounded that, I think really played a big part in the ultimate success of H.264, and I hope that continues with H.265, I think, and my sense is that it will, okay? I think there are a couple of other things that are maybe a little bit different this time with HEVC relative to other codecs that potentially users might be looking at. I mean, clearly, if you look at the whole, WebM kind of initiative from Google, that probably arrived a little bit late compared to H.264. But if you look at the relative timing today between H.265 and, say, VP9, okay, much closer, okay? In fact, already a reference, codec that's out there, that people are basically working on today. And things like profiles and stuff all need to be worked on. But there are some, alternatives that are available. So some folks, who are concerned about the licensing might say, well, I'm going to, basically I'll adopt VP9 or something. And I think Mozilla, I think, is doing something similar as well with the DALA initiative. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one. I don't know too much about it, but there are some other codecs that, are nominally kind of, license free. So on the licensing side, I think that that might cause a little bit of confusion. I think on the if we put licensing aside and then you look at what are the other potential barriers to HEVC, I don't know if it's necessarily a barrier to HEVC, but I think there are some kind of things on the 4K side that still have to work through, and especially things like just simple things like HDMI 2.0 interoperability. Okay. I mean, we haven't even started that yet. So, I mean, that's going to be a requirement for 4K P60 and HDCP 2.2. And these kinds of things, will all have to go through all the interop labs before that becomes fully baked and mature. But, I think that's all kind of like all the usual stuff that you got to deal with when you're rolling out new technologies. So I don't see that. I think the benefits of the technology outweigh all those, potential, barriers.
And do you think that the VP9 versus H.265 is very similar to the VC1, which was VC9, H.264? Is it the same thing all over again, where it's one company saying, okay, here's our...
Yeah, I think it's similar, but it's different from the standpoint that they're kind of happening at the same time as opposed to being delayed in time. I think the timing is different this time around, and I think that's what makes it more interesting, the fact that the timing is so close.
Mm.
So you had brought up VP9. Do you think it will have a big impact on HEVC, as whether it might hurt it, help it, delay it?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's too early to tell. I think there's lots of people that are looking at it. I mean, we're certainly looking at it, and if that became something that was interesting to the market, we could certainly implement it. I would say today it's relatively early on, and I think until, as I said, those profiles get kind of more consolidated and defined, I think there's still some ways to run on that. But will it displace HEVC? I don't see that.
I think looking at the standards-based approach and the consortium of companies that come together, the joint video teams, MPEG, and having them come together and having it be, video is complicated, right? And there's only so many ways to do it right. We recognize it's a major problem to solve, and that's why companies come together to jointly solve this problem. And so I believe the HEVC H.265 path is the one that's the most sustainable and reasonable and grounded in supporting a lot of companies that come together and make sure there's interoperability. So I mean, that's the path that we're making sure works well, and I think that's the path that I think most companies and content providers are actually betting on. So I think that's where there's the momentum right now, and that's where I think there's going to be the most success. But it remains to be seen. I mean, there's still. Sure, things can happen with a new codec, but just the way the technology plays out, I see H.265 and HEVC being the path to actually success with the new compression.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
And from our perspective, I think what we've seen, and we may not have complete visibility into this, but for VP8, VP9, We do hear about it, and it's really from one company, and they are a powerful company for sure, but we don't see a lot of industry support, at least in terms of the customer bases that we serve, which tends to be the high end of the market. We don't see it asked for. I don't even see it really in RFPs anymore. We used to see, VP6, VP8 a little bit, but it's really being driven by one. If the market did go that way, I think we'd be okay with that. Everything that we've put into the field over the last 3 years is software upgradable to HEVC, and it would also be software upgradable to VP9. And so that would be okay. And I think that's one area that's different this time around, is that there's actually a lot of infrastructure in place at the content source, or where that creation is happening for distribution, specifically that we've put into the market that can software upgrade to all these different components. We're also doing a lot of learning, I think, around HEVC and porting some of that knowledge back into H.264 and MPEG-2 even, and that's why Aidan brings up the bit rates that started out as MPEG-2 at 20 meg, H.264 initially at a 10 meg for HD, and now getting into the 5.6 range is because the processing power is there to do some of the art around video compression on the encode side, and so it doesn't really matter, at least from our perspective, which way things go. We'll cope with it.
Although I will chime in and say that I think that's true, although when you talk about commodity end devices that will be able to play that with low, with efficient use of batteries and things, that's where you get into some tricky things of, that's not quite as software and updatable, as flexible potentially as something that's baked into the chip in an ASIC, and what's needed to actually go big with the technology is really make it a commodity and make it really efficient, low wattage and easy to put into the platforms.
Yeah. That's why we won't necessarily do a VP9 proactively, because I think it would create a lot of challenges probably to the market.
Yeah, I'd be interested in getting any opinions from the floor on this. Maybe we could talk about this at the close.
Okay. And wanted to bring up the fact that work on HEVC standardization is ongoing. There's extensions being proposed, and so what do you see those extensions adding to HEVC for some of the different markets?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be an additional draft of the standard, I think, in January, which is not atypical. Each video compression standard starts with a core. In this case, the core was around video distribution, so 420 profile, mostly 8-bit. But those need to extend to higher profiles, maybe incorporating the 422 will be in there, additional bit depth, color depth, so that it can be used as a contribution at a higher level of profile, so that it can apply not only to distribution but also the contribution side. I don't think it's going to really fix anything that might have been a challenge with the first draft. It's just extending it to have a wider applicability, which I think is a good thing, and it's how the standards always work for video compression.
Yeah, it's going to be a superset of functionality, not change fundamentally what's there.
Actually, I have a question, and that is one of the, I think, early complaints, and I'm not sure if this is still an issue with H.265, was basically its lack of support for interlaced content. Okay, so as I thought about that, I thought, well, here we are today with HD, and a lot of it's been delivered as 1080i content. Okay, and so now we go to H.265, and well, now you got to go to progressive. Okay, so now you got to go to progressive, so now you're doubling the bit rate requirement. Okay, but you're getting half of that back in terms of the compression. So net, do you actually end up being any better off? So that's more of a question than anything. I'm interested to see if there's any enhancements in the standard that will be dealing with interlace content and how to deal with that.
I think it's going to, but I'm not sure that anyone.
There could be an answer there.
That.
Right question.
I'm not sure that the streaming media crowd necessarily cares about that, but
We've certainly seen from when we do our certification kits to our our different C manufacturers, there's been we've had interlace in there, and they continually say, why do you guys
Yes.
make us do this? And so we have been taking interlace out.
Aidan, first question is your chip 7445 capable of supporting SAFF, sequence adaptive field frame?
I have no idea, Thierry.
This is part of the problem. So just for everybody to understand, HEVC has defined interlace support at the sequence level. So one sequence can be declared only interlaced or only progressive. And algorithm people have been fighting for the last 24 months, and they came to the conclusion it was good enough. A coder company like Harmonic can do that, but in order to enable that, we need decoder company, mostly set-top box, because I hope on tablet nobody will ever touch interlace content. Nope. But what we hear from service providers for classical IPTV, cable, and satellite, from a content perspective, we are not allowed to take 1080i and to format convert to 720p 60 before we encode. This is written in the contract. This is possible only on OTT. That's why, Keith, I would like to make a clear clarification. On OTT, you can do that because nobody cares about the quality. On the TV, you cannot do that. So this, I think, is more on the court of Broadcom. Sorry to put you on the spot, Aidan, but it's addressed by the standard. Just need decoded chips.
Well,
thank you.
I mean, thanks, Thierry. I mean, that's basically why I raised the question, because there were certainly a lot of questions surrounding that, and the whole interlace versus progressive, and that conflicting with the potential compression gains. So I'll get back to you on the SAFF support.
Okay, the last question I have for the panel is why is HEVC and anybody who wants to put an opinion in on 4K not going to be another 3D?
Oh, man. I mean, I think partially because it's a natural extension of the viewing experience as opposed to something that's a little bit orthogonal to it. I think the experience for a good percentage of the population with 3D is not a very pleasant one, and I happen to be one of those folks. It doesn't connect with my either my astigmatism or my nearsightedness or the fact that I have glasses on. I've never found it to be a really good experience. I think the other reason is, and we tell this a lot, and I think Rovi tells this story, is the power of software. I mean, I think the world in video processing is moving away from, particularly on the content creation side and customization side, not necessarily on the decoder side, is moving much more flexibly towards the future. And so, a lot of what exists today can be reutilized for this next generation. That barrier doesn't exist. For H.264, the transition, it was a wholesale swap out, and even in many cases, the generational advantages that happened over the course of 10 years from 10 megabits to 9 to 8 to 7 to 6 were requiring swap out of compression equipment. Today, everything can be virtualized in the cloud. There's going to be a session right after this in the B track on the BBC's kind of vision for cloud-based video infrastructure. I think everyone should go see that, because that in itself is articulating, how easy it is to actually transition technology. And I think we all feel it in our homes, with our kids, with how we watch TV or videos. The world has become dominated by easier transitions because it is a software-dominated world, and this has happened in a lot of different industries. I think video is one of the last ones because it's particularly challenging in terms of processing power. So
I mean, the internet would have never existed if it wasn't for compression, right? Those images that started coming, compression is so fundamental to making it all work. And when there's leaps in compression, either you go with that leap or you'll be at a huge competitive disadvantage for all those that are going to that better compression, right? So I mean, if I say, hey, you can save 10% on something, on a cost, you're going to be like, yeah, I'll go the 10%. Well, when that comes to be a 30, 40, 50% savings, it seems like it's an obvious, there's so much pull there. And in the case of, as we're going to, more and more wireless spectrum, needing to be used, as we were saying in the broadcast space and also in the direct mobile space, as you try to push more video through there, it's going to get congested. That's actually where there's a limit. That's where Moore's law doesn't help you. You do have to use the processing power of the devices to sort of limit the transfer of data. And this is the big thing that sucks up all the bandwidth for everything is video. So there's so many forces that pull us towards using better compression. And it's just a real simple statement is, better compression makes the video experience better, period, right? So whatever metric you want to use, cost, startup time, simultaneous streams, better quality, 4K, all those things can be addressed with saying, hey, just go with better compression. So I think comparing to 3D is like, nope, it's definitely, it's like I said, it's an orthogonal type of thing. And there's just so much, pull into using a better compression technology. That it's not going to be the same as 3D, absolutely not.
Yeah. I went to see Gravity at IMAX 3D. It was really good. Yeah. I don't know who saw it. It was really, really good. So I'm like, I'm kind of like, I'm a big 3D fan now. Certainly for IMAX anyway. I don't know if I want to sit, in front of my TV at home with those glasses on, but in general, I think we got to be a little bit careful about 4K, okay? And what I kind of, what I potentially see is that 4K can kind of win or lose depending upon how well it's executed, okay? And there's certainly lots of, questions regarding, okay, can you really tell the difference between 4K Ultra HD and HD, on a 40 or 44 inch or 47 inch screen? I mean, how much are you really going to be able to tell the difference? And we were talking about this earlier on, and that, it's not, we don't think it's all about resolution either. It's about, the quality of the pixels and color depths and things like that that can really make that thing pop. So I think, if it's well executed on TVs and consumers can really see the difference between, an Ultra HD experience and an HD experience, I think it will be successful. I think the danger is that, is potentially, you could get TVs out in the market that will maybe have, maybe will not have, good color depth, maybe will not have good frame rate conversion, maybe will not have good scaling, and there's a lot of question mark about having HD content displayed in 4K and quality of upscaling and things like that. So depending upon how it's actually executed, I think that can make a big difference in terms of people's the perceptions of 4K versus HD. A lot of people looked at Blu-ray and said, hey, not enough difference between Blu-ray and DVD, and maybe that was part of like Blu-ray's woes. So I think that certainly we shouldn't ignore that, okay? And 4K definitely needs to be well executed, I think, if it's going to be successful in the market.
Okay, that's the questions I had for the panel. We wanted to open it up to questions from the floor. There is, as shown before, a microphone, so please do ask your question into the microphone. Nobody has any questions. Wow, we must have done a really thorough job.
Go.
From Redbox Institute. So my question is regarding the clients that we are developing. So definitely we want to be in the industry when HEVC is there. So what do you think from a retailer perspective? Like when should we get into looking into developing clients and our contents delivering on HEVC? Should we wait for it to mature like mid of next year, or should we start looking into it now? And not only, we did talk about, wireless, what about, Xbox and PS4 where we have the opportunity for much bigger bandwidth to bit rate to be parsed? Are they also looking into H.265 encode?
So I'll try to maybe restate the question too to clarify. So you're asking about when are clients going to be ready to start consuming this? Mm-hmm. And I think we're starting to see some. I mean, certainly the PC can do it now. I think more and more we evolve. One of the patterns I think that you can look at is currently with adaptive streaming. What do? You take a single title and you encode it to multiple different bit rates and potentially resolutions. And so one title is usually it could be as high as 9 or 15 different tracks of video. If you toss in a few HEVC ones in there, at first maybe only a few devices will start to use it, but as that starts to ramp up, they'll start to be able to use those assets. And so you can't lose in the sense of, well, it maybe costs you some encode time, but you'll be able to see more and more clients being able to play back HEVC streams. It's just going to keep increasing. I think devices that can use it certainly have a better experience than devices that don't, because, as I said, it'll just be using less bandwidth for you or be higher quality. So I think you should think of it as, well, if you're encoding assets, maybe you should be encoding some in HEVC and having them be there, and they might be a little bit latent, but they will eventually start to be consumed by more and more clients over time.
And I agree with that. We have clients that are delivering to 1,000 devices. And I've asked the question, okay, to get to 1,000 devices, how many different encodes does it actually take?
It takes more than one.
and the answer to that in one customer's case was 36 different profiles. And that's a little bit on the extreme side, but we have many, many customers that are doing north of 20. And when you get down into it, it's actually there's Windows Media profiles, there's all the different SD profiles, there's HD, all the 264, as well as traditional set-top box delivery in MPEG-2, and it really starts to add up. I think HEVC, you wouldn't want to go full boat, and just say that's all we're going to do, because the market will be limited on those 1,000 devices. Mm-hmm. You might have a very small percentage today that can handle that, but over time, mm-hmm. those 1,000 will eventually evolve, just as H.264 did, to be very widely supported, because most customers want to have not necessarily ubiquity like that. I mean, 1,000 is pretty close to covering everything, but you have to have a big critical mass in order to monetize properly.
And there was a panel yesterday. There was somebody from Qualcomm on the panel, and they mentioned that they're going pretty hard at putting HEVC into their solution. So on the mobile side, with as fast as mobile devices churn, there ought to be a significant number, definitely tens of millions, if not reaching hundreds of millions of mobile devices next year that are going to be capable of decoding HEVC in hardware, as opposed to Qualcomm's already done demos of being able to run software decoding on their solutions.
And we can't forget the legacy base of devices either. There will be for quite some time, H.264 capable devices that will not have H.265 capability. So certainly, availability of low-cost transcoding capability in gateways to do that H.265 to H.264 conversion. I mean, all those things are going to be all kind of getting in line, and in place next year. So even servers, even if I'm an operator or a broadcaster or whatever, if you just want to take advantage of those efficiency gains on the access side, and you're concerned about legacy, there are still fairly cost-effective ways to deliver the content to legacy H.264 clients as well.
I mean, I hadn't thought about it in terms of the transition, but especially in the early days, it may make sense to talk to someone like us that has a cloud-based solution to basically spin up a bunch of instances just for the purpose of early trials of HEVC, to get a hold of that content and not have to buy infrastructure, to see how it grows over time. And then as it does grow, you bring in infrastructure that would be more hardware-based and kind of appliance-based and owned, if that's the model. It's a good way to get exposure to cloud-based architectures for video processing, and way more inexpensive in terms of, especially for that low volume scenario. So.
Okay. Thank you very much to the panelists. They're telling me it's time to wrap it up. So thank you very much for being a good audience, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.